Amen.
Christ is in our midst.
He is and always shall be.
Brothers and sisters, this week the church was the beneficiary of a great, wonderful, saving event with the decision of the Holy Synod to canonize a very wonderful woman as a saint whose name is Matushka Olga Michael. I have also seen her name as Matushka Olga Nikolai, which is the first name of her husband, Archpriest Nikolai Michael, who reposed before she did in Alaska. So I think, her name is going to be Saint Olga, but how they're referring to her seems to have changed slightly in time. But this is a very saintly woman who is well known to us. And I found this article that Father John Shimchuk authored, which is just so wonderful. I want to read a little of it to you. It describes her life and what she was like. Matushka Olga Michael, wife of the departed Archpriest Nikolai O. Michael, from the village of Kwethluk on the Kuskokwim River in Alaska, is as described in Father Michael Alexa's book, Orthodox Alaska, was neither a physically impressive or imposing figure. She raised 8 children to maturity, giving birth to several of them without a midwife. While her family was away taking care of while her husband was away taking care of many other parishes, she kept busy raising her family and doing many things for other people. One is reminded of the story of Tabitha in the book of Acts, when hearing that in addition to sewing Father Nikolai's vestments in the early years and crafting beautiful parkas, boots, and mittens for her children, she was constantly sewing or knitting socks or fur outerwear for others. Hardly a friend or neighbor was without something Matushka had made for them. Parishes hundreds of miles away received unsolicited gifts, traditional Eskimo winter boots, mukluks, to sell or raffle for their building fund. All the clergy of the deanery wore gloves or woolen socks, which she had made for them, while fulfilling many of the other tasks, like preparing the Eucharistic bread, that are often assumed by other priests' wives. She also knew the hymns of many feast days, including Palm Sunday, Holy Week, and Pascha, in Yupik, her Eskimo language, by heart. After miraculously surviving an initial bout with cancer when it seemed that nothing could be done, she eventually succumbed to the return of the disease, preparing herself for death, which took place on November 8, 1979, with great courage and faith. It appeared that the normal snow and river ice of that time of the year would prevent many people from attending her funeral. But the weather uncharacteristically changed, and a southerly wind helped to melt the ice and snow, allowing parishioners from the neighboring villages to make the journey to Kwethluk. Hundreds of friends filled the newly consecrated church on the extraordinary spring-like day of her funeral. Upon exiting the church, the procession was joined by a flock of birds, although by that time of the year, all birds have long since flown south. The birds circled overhead and accompanied the coffin to the gravesite. The unusually frozen soil had been easy to dig because of the unprecedented thaw. That night, after the memorial meal, the wind began to blow again. The ground refroze. Ice covered the river. winter returned. It was as if the earth itself had opened to receive this woman. The cosmos still cooperates and participates in the worship of the real people. That is, the name the native people give to themselves. It is as if the cosmos still cooperates and participates in the worship of the real people, in the worship of the real people offered to God. It's just such an extraordinary account of her life and of her death. This article, which, as I mentioned, Father John Shimchik authored, also has several accounts of dreams and appearances that Matushka Olga made to different people. One of them is a woman who was a victim of a rape, and it's a very moving and profound story. I'm not going to read it, it's kind of long, but she counsels this woman and helps her to be relieved of the burden that she was carrying in such a beautiful and intimate way, reminding her that those who harmed her could not really take away from her the beauty and dignity which God himself had bestowed upon her. And as a result of this dream, the woman is able to resume her life. The fathers of the church often counsel us not to put too much emphasis on dreams. They are problematic, but nevertheless, it's an incredibly beautiful account. And Father John ends his article with a reflection on how now Saint Olga could be a great help to those who suffer from sexual violence as a result of this account. Regardless, we do need a Saint Olga like this in our contemporary time, when we seem to be overwhelmed by difficulties and challenges, great strife across the world, in so many places. We need to be reminded of the sacramentality of life, which we are so quick to forget. And we need to be reminded of how in humility and in poverty, there is no reason why we cannot experience that sacramentality. Why we have to be estranged from our true self. And Matushka Olga is revealing to us in the simplicity of her life and in the things that she did, this kind of connection that we really have as human beings, as creatures of God, as those who are the beneficiaries of God's grace. How blessed we are, and the dignity with which we ought to live. Also, it is very interesting how she doesn't seem to have had a problem with her own death. She prepared herself for it and submitted to it, understanding that this is somehow part of the natural order of things, not an issue for sentimentality, but rather for courage and belief. That's a very moving testimony that this woman, filled with faith, was able to live her life piously, joyfully, and diligently, and then when the time came to accept that change that would occur in a kind of sober and inspiring way. So I think that she is perhaps very aptly suited for our needs, our current needs. And the Holy Synod, in canonizing her, blessed the painting of icons with her image and the creation of an official life of her story, of her life, as well as hymnographical texts that would be used on the occasion of her feast, which is to be celebrated on November 10. So it just seems to me that this is the greatest and most important thing that has happened this past week, and how important it could be for us, for each of us in our lives, if we would look to Saint Olga, Matushka Olga, for guidance and for support and for help in the times when we are lonely or isolated, where we have doubts, where we are filled with despair or anxiety. And you know, these things happen to all of us from time to time. But she seems to be that kind of person who, because of the steadfastness of her faith, was able to weather those events without somehow in doing things that would detract from herself. She understood that the dignity with which she lived, that she possessed, was not somehow her own dignity, but it was God's dignity that she received as a gift. And that is what we all need to remember. And that is how we need to live. Amen.